Hey everybody, Tracy Brown here, and it is time for us to build some momentum. I love taking 10 or 15 minutes and just dropping in and reminding myself and you and others that it really is up to us based on what we choose to do every day in the conversations we have with the people we come into contact with, whether or not we are able to build momentum to interrupt race-based hatred and violence. Just in case you are not familiar with me or with the What Is Mine to Do Facebook group, I am the founder and moderator of a public Facebook group where we do ask that question: what is mine to do to interrupt or end race-based hatred and violence? And away from the What Is Mine to Do Facebook group, I work with organizations and with leaders all over the country on all areas of diversity and inclusion, like recognizing the resource that diversity is and how do we use it in an inclusive way in order to achieve our shared goals, whether that is in the workplace or in our church community or in our schools or in the neighborhoods we live in. It really is up to us. And while there are many, 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 many ways that all of us can be involved in community organized activities and political movements, one of the things that makes the What Is Mine to Do Facebook group different is that it assumes that we will be involved in collective activities, but most of what we focus on in the What Is Mine to Do Facebook group is what can individuals do. You don't have to wait to join. You don't have to wait to learn more than you already know. You go into action. You don't have to wait for permission. You don't have to wait until you have 10,000 people together to go on a march. What can you do? What is mine to do in the interactions I have with the people I come into contact with in the places where I live, work, or worship? That's the short version. And if that interests you or if that's helpful for you, then please come on and hang out with us over at the What Is Mine to Do Facebook group. So what is momentum? Momentum is a weekly 10 to 15 minute segment where I pull out one idea or one tip or tactic or one thing to think about for the next week as we individually and collectively begin to build momentum to interrupt race-based hatred and violence. And today, the topic that I want to focus on is this idea of trendy terminology. 4 tips. What should you know? Now, mostly what I've experienced is that what ends up becoming trendy terminology really isn't new at all. It just may be something that's been talked about in behavioral science, psychology, sociology, anthropology, and then somehow it begins to be used in the by the media or by a group, and people are talking about it, or it's a term that has been used in political or and community organizing for centuries or decades, but all of a sudden there's some public visibility, and that can be positive visibility, or it can be negative or harmful or challenging visibility. It matters not, but it becomes trendy. Now, trendy can be good, right? We learn new things, we learn new terms, and we start to use them, and we use it in an educational way to get more courage or to get deeper understanding of what is causing the race based hatred or violence. And we use it in a positive way. But what I want to focus on today is what happens when it becomes trendy in a negative or challenging way. And that happens actually, there's pretty much a predictable cycle. If there's terminology, or if there are terms that get trendy in a positive way, and it gets to reaching a certain number of people, then all of a sudden the people who want to challenge that start using it and turning it into a negative. Right? We can look at recent examples like being woke was a really good thing until just in the last few years, where it began to be used as that's a negative thing. Right? We've got to fight against that, and giving more attention to that. Identity politics, right? It was something that people used in a positive way for decades, right? It is important to understand identity and culture and how it impacts what is happening in the decisions that are being made. And because we want to be inclusive, we're going to recognize identity, but then it became identity politics as something negative and something harmful. And then people are afraid to use it all of a sudden. White privilege, another good example. It was used to educate, and actually it wasn't new, and it started out as or white privilege started out really as a discussion around male privilege, that then it was like, oh, if that's happening in gender scenarios, oh, look, that same pattern happens based on race. That same pattern of privilege, unearned benefits, which has been used in sociology for more than 30 years, all of a sudden, and if you look over here, it applies in terms of disability and abilities. It occurs in terms of or national origin. It occurs related to professions as well, or in the workplace with tenure. So it's very interesting. And all I want to do is really bring to your attention, there are 4 things you want to keep in mind. If you are in a conversation and people are upset, or even if not upset, just having a conversation, and there's some terminology that is being used. Number 1, be sure that everybody is defining it the same way. So the thing that I notice that happens more often than not is that 4 people are talking or 10 people are talking, but there are 4 different definitions. That's even just with the word diversity or the term inclusion. Like, let's make sure we're on the same page, or that we know we're talking about different things, because I now understand your definition, and I'm interested because it doesn't match my definition and what I know about that term or that terminology. And then that's a whole different conversation than fighting to be right or wrong. It's like, oh, I've never considered it that way. Or I actually don't agree with your definition, because here is my definition. So I don't have to argue with you about yours, but I do need to be crystal clear about my definition. This is one of the most important tips. Know what you are talking about and be able to describe what you are talking about in everyday language without using the term. Again, example. Um, well, this is an easy example. So, white privilege, since we're talking about race, let's say white privilege. And so it can mean lots of different things to lots of different people. But I have been amazed at how many people I have had to coach through understanding that privilege, the way we use it in regular, just everyday language, might reflect something I earned. Like I went to college for 6 years and I got my master's degree and I earned the right to be in a job that requires a master's degree in engineering, and that was my major. And we do use privilege in that way in everyday conversation. But when we're in conversations related to inclusion and when we're in conversations related to race, racism, and race relations, if someone is talking about the concept of white privilege, they're talking about unearned benefits that seem to be the normal standard for people who are in whatever group has the privilege. And again, it would work whether you were looking at the group the norms were set around as white based on race, or if you turned the table and didn't look at race, you looked at gender, or you looked at religion, or you looked at ability. That the group the norms are set around are going to end up experiencing some element of privilege and thinking that is normal and true for everyone when it actually isn't, when it's been documented that people who are not in that group receive very different treatment. It's a generic definition. Someone I'm talking to might have a different definition. And if I know that, then I know how to have the conversation with them. So, number one, know what you're talking about and be able to explain it in a neutral, matter of fact way. Number two, know your sources or have some sources or know where to go to find credible sources, not just someone who wrote an editorial, not someone who's just excited and passionate, but either academic sources, business sources, and a pattern of sources that support your definition. What happens way too often is that we get into these arguments about trendy terminology or technology that has become trendy. And then people are just arguing for what they feel, not arguing or not presenting based on here's the research I've done and this is why I believe it. You may not believe it. You may be listening to or reading different things than I'm reading, and you may have a different belief, but I need to be able to explain and talk about my own. So that is number two. That is number two. Let's see if we can go to number three. That is number two. That is number two. I am looking like I am frozen. I can't tell for sure. So we're going to try something really quick and see if we was frozen for you. We are back, and so that whole piece around making sure that you have looked up some additional sources and that you feel comfortable in quoting them. Number three, Don't be defensive. So when there are people who have a different view than you or different information and they've been going to different sources, that doesn't mean you have to defend yours, but you do need to be able to explain yours and stand firmly on that ground. And then that is connected with number 4, avoid debating. So avoid debating when it's not in a scenario that is designed for debate or you haven't prepared for debate and you are clear or are unclear about the reason for the debate. So I may debate some of these terms if I am being a part of a panel discussion and that's what we're talking about and we're trying to give people different views. But if I am talking to someone in my spiritual community who has a different view and says, everything I'm saying is wrong, and I'm saying, well, you can feel that way, you can believe that, and it's not going to change my mind. There's nothing for us to debate because these are the facts that I have. And it's not agreeing to disagree. It is, I am very clear. I don't have to give you permission to, beat me up or use these terms as a weapon. And so you just need to accept that this is what I believe and this is how I'm using the term. So often, people who are wanting to interrupt race based hatred and violence get stuck in that place of, well, I don't know what to say. Well, they have a better argument than I do. Prepare yourself, know where you're coming from, and also be the person who agrees that you are not going to use this terminology as a weapon and you are not going to use this terminology as an excuse. Neither one works. So my hope for you is that these 4 quick ideas help you and give you an idea about what you can do when the terminology that you are using begins to get trendy or begins to be attacked in a way that makes it trendy terminology on the negative side. So, number 1, know what you're talking about and be able to explain it in everyday language. Number 2, have some resources beside your own personal opinion, some sources or resources that go beyond just this is what I believe and this is what I think. Number 3, don't get defensive. Don't be defensive. You know what you know, and you are using it in the way that is meaningful for you. And number 4, avoid debate unless you are in a planned debate situation that is using debate as an educational tool. Those are my 4 tips. That is the momentum episode for this week. I hope it is helpful for you. I hope that you will join me and 7,000 other people over at the What Is Mine to Do Facebook group. And I'll see you again right here next Monday on Momentum.